The Seat of Truth. On a clear Monday morning, 17-year-old Elijah Bennett settled into Seat 2A of the Skylux Airlines first-class cabin. Dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans, headphones snug over his ears, Elijah was fully immersed in his tablet, watching a documentary his father had recommended. A quiet, intelligent young black student with a calm demeanor, Elijah was used to people underestimating him based on appearances. His father, Lionel Bennett, the renowned tech magnate and CEO of Bennett Global Technologies, had always instilled in him a sense of self-worth rooted in integrity, not clothing or status. As the boarding continued, a white woman in a tailored ivory pantsuit approached, pausing with a scowl at Elijah. Behind her, Jessica Langford, a senior flight attendant, walked briskly, her forced smile barely masking condescension. "It seems there's been a mix-up, young man," Jessica said, her tone overly sweet. "We need you to move so this seat can be reserved for our VIP guest, Mrs. Karen Whitmore." Elijah blinked, confused. "I think there's a misunderstanding. This is Seat 2A. It's on my ticket." Karen Whitmore, standing just behind Jessica, let out a soft, scoffing laugh. "I always sit here. It's practically my seat every week." Jessica's smile waned as she looked Elijah up and down. "First-class seats are typically for our elite customers. I'm afraid you may have misunderstood the boarding assignment." Elijah calmly removed his headphones and handed her the boarding pass. Jessica examined it, her expression tightening when she saw his name printed clearly, Elijah Bennett. Her brows furrowed, but she remained silent for a moment. Karen, impatient, chimed in, "Jessica, you know me. I shouldn't have to explain why this is unacceptable." "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore," Jessica said, turning to Elijah. "Would you mind moving to another seat just for this flight? It would really help us accommodate one of our long-standing VIPs." Elijah looked around, noticing several passengers watching curiously, some already recording. He spoke politely but firmly. "I'm sorry, but this is my seat. My father booked it for me, and I have every right to be here." Jessica's tone hardened. "First-class tickets are quite expensive, young man. Are you sure your ticket was purchased properly?" "Yes," Elijah answered, his voice steady. "My father is Lionel Bennett." Jessica's eyes twitched slightly at the name. Karen, however, seemed unfazed. "Jessica, if this isn't resolved, I will speak to your supervisors," Karen hissed quietly. Jessica glanced nervously at the growing number of phones pointed their way. A moment later, Trevor Dawson, the flight supervisor, arrived. "What's the problem here?" Jessica quickly whispered an explanation. Trevor's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer to Elijah. "Listen, son. We can settle this quickly. Just move to another seat. Let's not make this difficult." Elijah stood, not to leave, but to face Trevor directly. "This is my seat. I won't give it up unless you're prepared to remove me unjustly." "If you don't cooperate," Trevor said, his voice low and threatening, "you'll leave us no choice." From the cockpit, Captain Howard Reynolds emerged, a stern man known for prioritizing elite customers. After listening to Trevor, he turned to Elijah. "You're delaying the flight. If you don't comply, security will escort you off." Elijah replied, his voice unwavering. "I'm not causing a disturbance. I have a valid ticket and a right to sit here." Moments later, 2 security officers arrived. The cabin fell into complete silence. Elijah gathered his belongings, keeping his chin high as he walked past the trio, Trevor, Jessica, and Karen, without a word. Outside, a crowd of waiting passengers and observers murmured and filmed as Elijah was escorted away. Unbeknownst to all, seated several rows behind had been Ava Sinclair, a freelance journalist. Ava had recorded everything. The disrespect, the bribe Karen subtly slipped into Jessica's hand, and the quiet dignity with which Elijah held his ground. By the time Elijah stepped off the plane, Ava was already editing the footage. Within minutes, she posted a short clip titled, "Young Black Student Kicked Off First-Class Seat for VIP Bribe." The video exploded online. Back in his corporate boardroom, Lionel Bennett received the video from colleague. The moment he watched the footage, his heart sank, then burned with fury. He ended the board meeting with one sentence: "This ends now." At Skylux Airlines headquarters, CEO Jonathan Whitaker watched as the scandal unfolded in real time. When a trembling assistant whispered, "Sir, Elijah Bennett is Lionel Bennett's son," Whitaker turned pale. Bennett Global held the largest private investment stake in Skylux. An emergency board meeting was called. Decisions were swift. Jessica Langford, Trevor Dawson, and Captain Reynolds were suspended immediately. Karen Whitmore was permanently banned. But the damage was done. Stock prices plummeted. News outlets worldwide covered the story. That night, Lionel Bennett issued a public statement. Bennett Global was terminating all partnerships with Skylux Airlines and pulling all investments. The financial collapse was immediate. But Lionel didn't stop there. He demanded a 48-hour suspension of all Skylux flights for mandatory anti-bias and ethics training. Whitaker had no choice but to comply. The company bled millions. But the real transformation had just begun. Inside the airline, employees underwent grueling sessions led by third-party ethics experts. Videos of Elijah's mistreatment were played. Tears were shed. Silence replaced denial. 2 days later, Elijah was invited to speak before the entire company. He stepped up to the podium and, with remarkable composure, recounted the events not with bitterness, but with hope. "I forgive you," he said, "but forgiveness doesn't erase the need for change." The audience erupted into emotional applause. Even Jonathan Whitaker stood and bowed his head in shame. Meanwhile, Ava's viral video was nominated for a National Journalism Award. She declined praise, saying, "The story belongs to Elijah. I just helped amplify his voice." Months later, Skylux Airlines became a case study in corporate reform. Other companies followed suit. Industry-wide training programs emerged, inspired by one young man's courage. And Elijah Bennett, once quietly removed from Seat 2A, was now standing on stages across the country, sharing a message that resonated beyond any cabin or corporate suite. True justice isn't about revenge. It's about recognition, correction, and the courage to change.